What is up, YouTube? So welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing the review of the iPhone 12 Pro. I've had it for about 3 weeks now. I got it on launch day and I'm pretty much ready to tell you guys about it and what I think of it. So this review is going to be a little bit of a different perspective probably than most people making videos on this phone, because my long-time viewers will know that I have been pretty resistant to the notched or the Face ID iPhones. I used an iPhone 8 for the past 3 years. I had an iPhone SE 2020 for about a month. I have completely skipped over the notched iPhone design. I've just been stuck with the 4.7-inch design just for personal preference reasons. But this year I finally decided to upgrade. So anyways, my perspective on this phone is probably going to be a bit different. I'm not upgrading from a 10, a 10S, or an 11 Pro. With that in mind, let's go ahead and kick off this review. I pretty much am going to do this how I typically do my reviews. We're going to be starting off with the design of the phone, because that is actually a big change with this phone this year. So the iPhone 12 Pro, it does not share the curved edges and, curved design that we've pretty much had since 2014. This is an iPhone 6, so this is the phone that popularized this design, and we've pretty much had that ever since, all the way up to the 11 Pro. So, of course, the screen has changed and a lot of that stuff, but the general overall design of the phone has remained the same. Not this year. Today, you can see we have the square sides and flat edges back. I actually have an iPhone 5 here for comparison, so you can see looking very similar. I was always a huge fan of this design. I think the 5 and the 4, moreover, one of my favorite iPhone designs for sure, and you can see the resemblance here. 8 years later. So I am a huge fan of this. I think it looks really good. I am kind of, over, like I said, the curved edges on the screen. You can see the glass pieces on the front and back are completely flat up to the edge. It's not even like a 2.5D type thing. They're just completely flat and seamless all the way up to the stainless steel band. So I am a huge fan of this new design. I am really glad they did it. It feels really nice in the hand. I find it easier to grip. I think it's a little bit less slippery this way, and I love it. It's freaking awesome. The Pacific blue color, we got to talk about that. As you can see, here it is. I think this is the best iPhone color that has ever come out, period. Of course, my favorite color is blue, so I might be a little bit biased there, but I really, really love this color. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. It is not like a really loud blue, and it's, kind of understated, and I love it. It looks so good. I also picked up the Apple leather case, which does match it almost perfectly, so when this is on here, it looks really, really good. And yeah, I am super happy with this color. This is quite possibly the best built iPhone I've ever held also. Of course, again, I've stuck with the aluminum iPhone, so I never really had a stainless steel iPhone, i.e. the 10, the 10S, and the 11 Pro. So this thing is super nice. The stainless steel band is absolutely amazing, although it does catch fingerprints. As you can see, this thing is a magnet for fingerprints. But anyways, as far as the actual quality, stainless steel is off the hook. I absolutely love this. And this phone is actually quite a bit weightier than, obviously something like an iPhone SE. Now, some people have been complaining about this, especially with the 12 Pro Max. Now, of course, that's a much bigger phone. But some people have complained about the weight, and I really don't feel that way. I think a heftier phone just makes it feel more substantial and more like a quality device. Of course, I shared this same sentiment back when the iPhone 6S came out to replace the iPhone 6. The 6S was made out of stronger aluminum, and it was quite a bit heavier. And to me, that just made it feel more like not a toy and more like a substantial piece of hardware, a very well-built phone. But anyhow, the tolerances on this phone are insane. Everything is just absolutely perfect. It just feels super awesome. This is a very, very well-built phone. Possibly one of the most well-built phones out there today. So I'm really, really happy with that. The overall size of the phone is somewhere between an 11 Pro and an iPhone 11. For those of you who are upgrading from last year's models, this thing is right in the middle. And the thickness is at 7.4 millimeters, which I believe is a little bit thinner than the iPhone 11 Pro. So yeah, the design overall, I really love it. I think it's awesome. But the only real thing that I don't like about it is obviously the fingerprints. Although I use a case on it, but I really see it's kind of a double-edged sword because I really like the shiny sides of this phone. I think it makes it look like a piece of jewelry. I'm a real big fan of it, but keeping this thing fingerprint free on the sides is near impossible, as you might be able to tell here. But again, like I said, cover it with a case, so nobody's really gonna find out. Next, I think we'll move on to the display because that is another large change here. I'll go ahead and unlock it here. As you can see, we now have a slightly larger 6.1-inch display instead of the 5.8-inch from the previous 11 Pro, and something that is just a minor detail compared to the 11 Pro and especially the iPhone 11, the bezels around the edges are slightly smaller, so just a little bit nicer, have a little bit more of an edge-to-edge feel, and I believe they were able to do this because, again, the screen edges aren't curved anymore. I am a huge fan of this. I think this is a really good looking display. We have a 2532 by 1170 resolution that is good for 460 pixels per inch, and the screen quality is top notch for sure. Get it? But no, really guys, the quality of this screen is a huge step up from any LCD iPhone, so anybody upgrading from like an iPhone 11 or an 8, 7, 6, you are going to be blown away with this display. I certainly have been. Of course, it's OLED, as you can see, well, as most people know, rather. It is an OLED screen. It is a pentile arrangement, but at this high of resolution, you're not going to really be able to tell. Everything just looks super sharp. The colors are great. The blacks are great because it's an OLED panel. And I am just super, super happy with the quality of this display. It's definitely amazing. We also have a new ceramic shield layer on the top. That's what Apple's branding for it. I believe it's very similar to Corning Gorilla Glass Victus, but basically how they explained it was they just infused some ceramic particles into the glass, which inherently makes it stronger impact-wise, which is cool. Apple says this thing is 4 times more drop resistant than the previous 11 Pro. No idea what that actually means in real life because every drop is different, but this phone screen should not be breaking. I've actually seen plenty of drop tests from like Everything Apple Pro and whatnot, which you are free to go check out, obviously, but he dropped this thing from like 10 feet and the front glass didn't break. It's worth noting that only the front display has this. The rear glass is still just the ion exchange process, so this might, is not going to be any stronger than last year, but the front display should be quite a bit better. Now, the display on this phone is amazing, I will agree, but there are 2 things that I still really want out of a new iPhone. I wish this thing came with 120Hz Pro Motion. That was a rumored feature this year, and ever since I saw that on the original iPad Pro in 2017, I was fantasizing about the day the iPhone gets that. And there are some, hypotheses that they didn't put it in because of 5G and all this other thing. The battery is actually slightly smaller than the 11, so basically, they didn't put it in for battery concerns, which I get, I understand. I'm not super upset about it, but I really, really wish this phone did end up coming with 120Hz, so that was a bit of a disappointment. And I also really, really wish someday they'll make an iPhone without a notch. Now, the notch really hasn't really bothered me too much. I've gotten used to it. I was really resistant to it for a long time, but I understand why it's there. It's not a huge deal, and you do tend to just live with it after a while. I'm not super bothered by it, but I still wish it wasn't there. So, oh well, maybe someday. I'm probably going to keep this phone until they do those 2 things, but yeah, those are my only 2 complaints display-wise. Otherwise, it's awesome. So now I want to talk about Face ID because this is another big reason I never really warmed up to the newer iPhones. I just thought that Touch ID was pretty much superior in every way, and I wasn't really down with this whole Face ID thing. Now, like I said in the last clip, the notch really is the reason, or Face ID really is the reason the notch exists, because we have a bunch of sensors up here that are responsible for that. As far as actually working, I have been actually pretty impressed with the way Face ID works. I believe it is more improved on like the newer phones, the 11 and the 11 Pro and this phone, compared to like the original iPhone 10. I've noticed that this thing works a little bit better than I expected it to. So one of my biggest complaints when Face ID first came out is if you have your phone just sitting on a table here and you want to look at it, you actually have to, you know, put your face right in front of it, like somewhere in here, to get it to unlock. But with this phone, I've actually noticed that I can be somewhat off axis still, just looking at the display, and it will still unlock. So I've been pretty impressed with the angles there. It works quite a bit better than I expected it to. And in some situations, Touch ID requires some form of consciousness because you have to put your finger in a certain location, whereas sometimes I'll be logging into a website or something and it'll just go boom, Face ID authenticated without me having to think about it. So that is pretty cool. Of course, in this pandemic related world we have going on here, Face ID does not work at all with a mask. So that is a big pain in the ass that's, you know, just been made a thing by the world events lately, but that is pretty annoying compared to Touch ID. I do have to either pull off my mask real quick or just enter the passcode, which is what I've been doing. But otherwise, you know, I still kind of miss Touch ID. If they put it back in an iPhone, I definitely won't complain, but Face ID works well enough. I'm not too fussed about it. Alright guys, so now I want to talk about the cameras because that was a major draw for me to upgrade my phone. I was not really satisfied with the iPhone 8's camera anymore 3 years in, but we have obviously 3 cameras on this new phone. As far as I'm aware, the actual sensors themselves are pretty much the same as the 11 Pro, although we do have a new 7-element lens on the primary camera, which is this guy, the wide camera, and it also does have a wider f1.6 aperture. So basically what that means is you're going to get better low light performance, which is always awesome. We do have deep fusion and night mode capability on all 4 cameras, so these 3 and the front selfie camera all have that capability now. That's pretty awesome. We do have a LiDAR sensor right here. Now this is for more than photos, but the biggest practical use I think for this LiDAR sensor is the improved autofocus, because this can actually keep track of the distance from the object that you're trying to focus on, and basically that just translates to much faster and more accurate autofocus, again in low light. So that's super cool. We also do have improved OIS on the primary camera, so the OIS motor can make 5,000 adjustments per second. So basically all that stuff means is you're going to get much faster and more accurate autofocus, and especially in low light conditions. So I'm really happy with that. I did take a couple of photos, especially in the night mode, so I'll go ahead and put those up for you guys right now, but I have been super impressed by the way this phone handles night shots. That was one of the biggest complaints I had with my iPhone 8 back in the day. Just if the lighting was not optimal, the photos didn't come out well, but this is super awesome. Then in the actual camera app, you can kind of do like a long exposure. So basically you just hold the phone steady for a couple of seconds, just lets in more light. Anyways, bottom line, all I'm trying to say is the night photos and the photos in general on this phone are pretty amazing. I'm really, really happy with it. This phone is also capable of doing the new Dolby Vision HDR video standard. I pretty much turned this off because most people right now won't be able to take advantage of it. You know, Mac computers don't support this standard yet. A lot of monitors don't, TVs, etc. So basically, with the Dolby Vision on, pretty much the only benefit you're going to see is on the phone itself. And so I just turned this off for compatibility reasons. It just causes a lot of problems if you don't have a HDR compatible display, which a lot of people don't. So I just turned it off, but that is another feature that this phone can do right now. Alright guys, so now I want to talk about performance, because Apple knocks us out of the park every year consistently, and we do have to talk about it. So this phone is running the new Apple A14 Bionic system on a chip. This is a 6-core CPU. It runs at 2.99 gigahertz, so just under 3 gigahertz, which is pretty impressive for a phone. I mean, I remember when the iPhone 5 was at like 1.2, so that's pretty cool. And the thing that I am really happy about is we now have 6 gigabytes of RAM in the Pro models only. The regular 12 has 4, but this one has 6 gigs of RAM. This is the first 5nm smartphone SoC. It's manufactured by TSMC, which is the same company that makes AMD's Ryzen CPUs. And big surprise here, guys, this phone is super speedy. Performance is off the hook. I absolutely love it. I know, shocker, right? New iPhone is fast. But the biggest difference I've noticed is the actual RAM management in the OS. Now, this has been a pretty big problem on like my older phones, especially my iPhone 8, where let's say I'd go into the Facebook app, I'd switch over to Instagram, and then I'd go back to Facebook to reply to a message or something, return to Instagram, and then boom, it would just reload, and I'd lose my spot in my feed or whatever. And you can apply that to pretty much any apps. Apps are just reloading constantly. Something that always bugged me about this is that like my iPhone 4 back in like 2011, it could cache apps for days, and that phone had 512 megs of RAM. So it didn't make any sense to me that, you know, my newer iPhone with 4 or 5 times the RAM couldn't do that. But that has been completely solved on this, and I've even heard from people that it has been a big improvement even over the 11 Pro. So if RAM management is your thing, if that's something you care about, I personally do, this phone is going to be awesome at it. I can open apps from, you know, like yesterday, and they'll still be loaded in, which is awesome. You will be very happy with the performance of this phone, and that SoC should keep this phone running very well for many years to come. Of course, Apple always supports their phones for several years with software updates, so if you're going to buy this phone and use it for a few years, I think you're going to be super happy with it. Next, we got to move on to one of the biggest headlining features and one of the things that Apple spent the most time talking about on stage, 5G. So this phone is the first 5G iPhone. We are running the Qualcomm X55 modem. It supports regular 5G, which is the lower band stuff, which is very similar to LTE, and the millimeter wave. So if you look on the side of the phone here, this little pill-shaped thingy here, that is the millimeter wave antenna window for the 5G. So anyways, this is really something that's going to vary with your area. I am in a 5G service area because I live here in Northern California, so my local city is completely blanketed in 5G. But of course, like I said, there are multiple flavors of 5G. So sometimes you're going to get speeds like this. This is 5G Plus, as AT&T calls it. This is the ultra-wideband 5G, and this is the stuff that they pivot in the marketing. So as you can see, got 330 down, which is insane. That's faster than my home internet, and 37 up. Now this was in downtown, in a spot where I was probably in line of sight with the tower. So those speeds you're going to see somewhat, you know, again, depending on your area. And other times you're going to see this stuff here. This is more mid-band 5G, so 100 down, 15 up. Still pretty good, but that is not the super fast millimeter wave stuff. And then sometimes you're going to see speeds that are pretty much exactly the same as LTE. So basically all I'm trying to say here is that it's faster sometimes, the potential is there, but the network is still being rolled out. So you're really only going to see the benefits of this if you're in a widespread 5G service area like I am. Now, there is also a smart data mode that Apple enables out of the box. So if we go into our cellular settings here, let's see, cellular data options. So there's a couple of options in here. You can see here that I have it on 5G auto, that, you know, it's kind of just like a smart 5G thing, so it's only going to really use it when it thinks you might need it. But then there's also another setting here for the data mode, and I put it on allow more data on 5G. So basically it just, that will improve quality or FaceTime calls and stuff like it says here. But I have noticed pretty much, again, since I'm in a wide service area, that I pretty much always see 5G in the top, you know, status bar here, except at my house. But aside from that, I'm seeing 5G quite a lot. And again, I don't think it's worth all of the marketing hype right now, but it is nice to have. It's not something that's going to make or break your phone. I don't think you should upgrade to this phone just for 5G. It's not really worth it at the moment. So that's how I feel about it, and that's going to be my spiel on 5G. Alright, so now we're going to talk about battery life. Now, I will have to start this off with a disclaimer. I'm really not a heavy user of my phone. Most days I'm averaging 2 to 3 hours of screen on time. I pretty much never use my phone for more than that in any given day. So with that in mind, I think that this battery life is quite a bit better. It's definitely better than any of the 4.7-inch iPhones, like by a long shot. I remember a lot of people when this phone came out, they were kind of skeptical of the battery life because the battery capacity is smaller than the 11 Pro at 2815 milliamps, but I've been pretty happy with it. As you can see here, we are at 2 hours and 3 minutes of screen on time today, and I am at 67%. So a lot of the times I can get away with not charging this phone overnight, so I can skip a nightly charge, for example. Now I also when I drive in my car, I use CarPlay, so it does top up the battery a couple times a day, depending on what I'm doing. But I have been able to go 2 days on this phone's battery, which is something I could never say about any of the 4.7-inch iPhones. So it's pretty cool. I think the battery life is pretty good, but if you're a super heavy user, it may or may not be enough for you. It's really one of those things where it just depends on who you are. But in my opinion, the battery life is quite good. Alright, so I gotta bring this up because it is a point of controversy this year. Apple stopped including chargers with this phone, so you no longer get not even the 5-watt brick or the 18-watt brick that you got with the 11 Pro. All you're getting in the box now is just a USB-C cable. So, I mean, a lot of people have been bitching about this. How could Apple charge $1,000 for a phone without a charger in the box? But I personally don't see it as a huge deal. But something to keep in mind is I've heard that on the 5-watt brick with this phone, if you just, if you're going to use the 5-watt brick you have laying around in your house right now, it takes 6 hours to charge this phone. Now, I'm kind of the person that I charge my phone overnight, so that really isn't a huge issue. But for some people, that's going to be way too long. And for those people, I would suggest you pick up this guy. This is an Anker Nano. A lot of YouTubers have been promoting this thing, but it really is cool. It is a nice charger. This thing is only $17 on Amazon right now, and it is a 20-watt USB-C PD compatible charger. So this thing charges this phone in record time. It's amazing. So if you're looking for a fast charger for your new iPhone 12, I would highly recommend the Anker Nano. Again, it's on Amazon for like less than $20. So that, I think, is a pretty easy solution for that problem. So with that said, I think that there's only one real thing I need to talk about. Is a lot of people might be wondering, the regular iPhone 12 is actually very similar to this phone. It has the same display resolution and size, same overall build. They are actually identical. The 12 Pro cases work on the 12. And so a lot of people might be asking, is it worth spending the slightly extra money on the 12 Pro, or should I just get the 12? In my opinion on this is, if you're going to be going for a 128 gigabyte iPhone 12, that's only $120 difference between the base 128 gig 12 Pro, and I think for that money, it's worth it just to spend the extra, because in the grand scheme of things, that's a pretty small amount of money. So I think for those people, it's worth it. But, I mean, you can also paint it a different way. If you don't really know you want the extra features like the telephoto camera or the stainless steel build, things like that, if none of that stuff really stands out to you, you're going to be just fine with the regular iPhone 12. So if you want to save yourself a tiny bit of money, go ahead. You most likely don't need the Pro. But again, since I think the prices are so close, I definitely went with the Pro this year. So, conclusion time. I think this is a really good phone. I think Apple did a great job this year. Again, there's a couple of things that I wish they still did, again, like 120 hertz, and the notch is still the exact same size, but those are relatively minor things. There are so many other things about this phone that are just awesome. I'd recommend it. I like it. I think that if you're waiting, you might be in kind of my camp. You're waiting for 120 hertz. You really, really want that feature. Chances are they're probably going to do it next year. So especially if you're on like an 11 Pro, I don't think this is worth buying at all. But if you're on an older iPhone and you're itching for an upgrade, I think this is a good phone. I don't see why not. Bottom line, I'm pretty happy with this phone, and I'm glad I purchased it. So with that said, thank you guys for watching this iPhone 12 Pro review, and I'll see you guys in the next video.